welcome everyone to Marvel Hub. This is DK Dynamite, and today we have the entire plot of Spider-Man Far From Home straight from somebody who's already seen the film. So at the time of recording this video, it is July 2nd, the official release date of Spider-Man Far From Home, but some people were lucky enough to have seen the film as of last night on July 1st, so that's why we're seeing all these full plot leaks all over Reddit and Facebook and all these other websites as well. So that's the explanation for that. So let's jump right into the entire plot of Spider-Man. So it starts off with, in Mexico, Nick Fury and Maria Hill encounter a storm, which is revealed to be the Earth Elemental. A superpowered man, Quentin Beck, arrives to fight the creature. In New York City, the Midtown School of Science Technology restarts its academic year to accommodate the students who were among those resurrected by Bruce Banner 8 months earlier. The school organizes a 2-week summer field trip to Europe. Peter Parker, while still distraught over Tony Stark's death, plans to confess his growing feelings for classmate MJ. He attends a fundraiser for the homeless, coordinated by his aunt May. There, he disconnects a call from Fury and leaves after being posed questions about Stark. In Venice, Italy, during the trip, Parker and his friends are among those attacked by the water elemental, which proceeds to wreak havoc on the city. Beck arrives and destroys the creature while Peter attempts to help. Fury sabotages Peter's trip and gives him Stark's glasses, which were meant for his successor. The glasses are equipped with the artificial intelligence Edith, which has access to all databases of Stark Industries and can launch weapons at command. Beck claims the elementals killed his family and that he hails from a different reality, one among many in the multiverse. Parker rejects Fury's plea for help and rejoins his class, but Fury covertly redirects the school's trip to Prague, where the fire elemental is projected to strike. It appears there at a carnival, but Beck, with Peter's help, destroys it. Fury and Hill invite Parker and Beck to Berlin to discuss the formation of a new superhero team. Parker considers Beck worthy of being Stark's successor and bequeaths him the Edith glasses. MJ deduces Parker is Spider-Man. They discover that a piece of detritus she retrieved during the battle is a projector that represents an image of the air elemental. The two realize Beck is a fraud. At a nearby pub, Beck, a former holographic illusion specialist at Stark Industries, who was fired for his unstable nature, thanks his team of fellow ex-Stark employees. Parker travels to Berlin and meets with Fury, only to realize that the version before him is an illusion created by Beck. Parker battles multiple illusions and is ultimately hit by a train. Surviving the impact badly injured, he falls unconscious in a train car. Awakening in a jail cell in the Netherlands, he breaks out and contacts Happy Hogan. Hogan flies Parker to London and reveals a suit manufacturing machine left behind by Stark, which Parker used to synthesize a customized costume. In London, Beck, seeking to kill MJ and any others to whom she might have revealed his secret, orchestrates a Tempest Elemental. Parker breaks through the illusion using his Peter's Tingle, gains control of Edith, and defeats Beck, who is shot by a misfired gun and apparently dies. Parker returns to New York City and begins a relationship with MJ. In a mid-credit scene, J. Jonah Jameson, publisher of the Daily Bugle, blames Spider-Man for the Elemental's attacks, broadcasting modified footage of the incident filmed and recorded by Beck, in which he incriminates Parker for his supposed death and reveals he is Spider-Man. In a post-credit scene, these Skrulls, Talos, and Soren are revealed to have been masquerading as Fury and Hill the whole time, assigned to impersonate them by the real Fury, who commands a Skrull spaceship. So this coincides very, very well with a previous leak we covered here on the channel. There were about 3 or so different plot leaks that we covered for Far From Home, and some of them were similar to one another, but there was one that really stood out, which ended up being the actual real one. So I'm assuming the actual real one leaked, and then you had 2 other people who went together and tried to essentially create their own version of that leak with some modified details that were so unique that they were almost believable. But it appears this was the actual correct leak for the film. Many people are supporting this. Obviously, there's some details in there that are really not included, but this is obviously a pretty brief summary of the main plot for Far From Home. Now, many people out there are kind of upset that Mysterio essentially wasn't from a different Earth and instead was an ex-Stark employee who then becomes Mysterio. Not sure how I feel about that, because I think that with this movie being the end of Phase 3 or the end of the Infinity Saga, it was a great opportunity to be like, you know what, it's the end of this 23 film arc, but we're setting up a lot of things to come, like things with the multiverse, multiverse, different Earths, different realities, different versions of Spider-Man, different villains coming from different Earths. It was a great opportunity to really set that up, and I'm sure they still could set that up later on in the MCU. Maybe they're saving that big setup for a different MCU project in Phase 4 or beyond, but I just feel like this was a great film to be like, you know what, even though it's ending on such a high note, it's such a epilogue to Avengers Endgame, and it's also setting up some big things that are to be explored later on in the MCU, not necessarily just by Spider-Man, but for other major heroes as well, and maybe even heroes that come over from different Earths. Maybe the X-Men and Fantastic Four are from different Earths. We just don't know. So there was a big opportunity to do that in this film, and I'm really not sure why they said, you know what, let's just play around with the theory, but then we're going to automatically just call it bullshit and just say Mysterio definitely isn't from a different Earth, but instead is just an ex-Stark employee. I'm not sure how I feel about that just yet. Maybe when I see the film again, I'll feel a little bit better about that. I just have to rewatch it and get a better feel for the movie, but as of right now, the post-credit scenes is definitely really, really exciting and lives up to the hype that a lot of people were starting for it when they saw an early screening a couple of weeks ago. Jonah Jameson is officially in the MCU, with J.K. Simmons reprising the role. Obviously, he played the same role in the Sam Raimi universe many, many years ago, and we have a new version of J. Jonah Jameson in the MCU now, who I believe is gonna start his hatred for Spider-Man in a really funny and comedic way because of Mysterio's fake video that he put out, essentially confirming that Peter is Spider-Man. Obviously, that's true, but the way in which that's revealed in the post-credit scene makes it seem like Spider-Man killed Mysterio, which obviously is not true. So for the world to know Mysterio was essentially a hero to many people, and now that it's being rumored that Spider-Man killed him, obviously the world's going to react in a very interesting way, but we won't see the continuation of that cliffhanger until later on in Phase 4. So obviously at some point in Phase 4 or beyond, the world will finally see that Mysterio isn't a good guy and Spider-Man's actually innocent. And with the Skrulls post-credit scene, I'll talk about that in a second, but I want to briefly mention that I think there will be a way for the Skrulls to help Peter somehow prove to the world that he isn't Spider-Man. Maybe the Skrulls could take Peter's form while Peter's dressed up as Spider-Man so they can stand side by side, and then that can somehow prove to the world that Peter is not Spider-Man, so that can help his identity stay hidden for the remainder of his life in the MCU, because a lot of people out there are very upset with the fact that Peter, or Spider-Man, is one of very few heroes in the MCU specifically to have a secret identity. Despite the Sokovia Accords, despite all other plot lines going on in the MCU, Peter is that very unique hero that deserves to keep his identity a secret. And in the comics, whenever his secret was revealed to the world, the comic just never ran for that long. It just wasn't as popular, and people just didn't agree with that direction for the character of Spider-Man. So obviously it was retconned. I believe Doctor Strange or some other magician was able to make the world forget who Spider-Man actually was and that he was Peter Parker. So they could easily use Doctor Strange in Spider-Man 3 and have him, wipe the world's memory of, people knowing that he is Spider-Man, or they could of course use a Skrull and place them side by side and broadcast it on the news. They could do a couple of things like that. I'm sure that Skrull's setup is not just for Nick Fury and Maria Hill, but is definitely for something later down the line. But I also feel like that Skrull's post-credit scene is just a solidify the fact that Nick Fury is still in contact with the Skrulls, because I feel like a lot of people saw Captain Marvel and felt like there was some plot holes in there and some things that didn't make sense when looking at the current Nick Fury from Avengers 1 and 2, and I understand that, but I think the movie did a decent job with at least confirming that Nick Fury still has a relationship with Carol, with the Skrulls, and obviously Captain Marvel hasn't been back to Earth since the first Captain Marvel movie, apparently, as she made her first appearance back in Avengers Endgame. So Nick Fury hadn't seen her for, 15 plus years, maybe more. So I believe in Captain Marvel 2, maybe another future MCU project, we'll get more confirmation that yes, Nick Fury is still in full contact with the good Skrulls, with Captain Marvel. He still has her pager. So I feel like the post-credit scene with the Skrulls and Far From Home is just solidify that, to make you guys remember that Captain Marvel is an important film in the MCU, whether or not you like Brie Larson or her performance as Captain Marvel or not. Nick Fury is still playing a huge role in the MCU. Kind of took a break for a little little while after Age of Ultron and didn't really make a reappearance until the end of Infinity War or Avengers Endgame. But I do think the Skrulls will play a pretty big role going forward, and if there ever is a Secret Invasion storyline, it will just be confirmed that there are good Skrulls and there are bad Skrulls, as opposed to the comics where you don't really get too much of the good Skrulls. You don't really get a relationship between them and S.H.I.E.L.D. and all that much. So I think the MCU will definitely do a good job with explaining that. But in terms of this full plot, not confirming or revealing or teasing Norman Osborn or the Sinister Six, once again, it's been rumored, and a lot of people already know this, but it's been rumored that Tom Holland is going to be doing 3 different trilogies. You have his high school trilogy, his college trilogy, and then his adult trilogy. And then after that, you could start doing some Spider-Verse stuff with Miles Morales and some Venom crossovers and some other major projects featuring Spider-Man. But for now, I think with the current plan, they want Tom Holland to play Spider-Man for as long as possible. And Tom Holland himself even said that he wants to play Spider-Man until he can't walk anymore. So I think there are some real long-term plans for Tom Holland in the MCU. Spider-Man's obviously the face of Marvel, even though Marvel doesn't exactly own the full rights to Tom Holland's Spider-Man. I think the relationship with Sony is very important, and Sony obviously essentially gets a lot of extra money for doing movies like this, since Marvel, of course, puts the money together while Sony distributes it. So Sony doesn't have to do all that much to get these movies made. Obviously, they have to make a deal behind the scenes, but it's Marvel and Disney that put the movie together and allow Sony to distribute it. So I'm sure there are other things behind the scenes where Marvel and Disney obviously still make money, that's without a doubt, but I think ultimately it's a really good deal for Sony, and would almost be one of the worst business decisions in the world if Sony ever backed out of Tom Holland's Spider-Man deal. I think they know for a fact he is way too popular to mess up when it comes to his solo film. So I think with the idea of Tom Holland doing multiple trilogies, there is plenty of time to set up a major Sinister Six plotline, a major Norman Osborn plotline where he's a reoccurring villain for a couple of phases, like the next Thanos. There were rumors before that there would be a grounded storyline with a villain like Norman Osborn, and then there would be a cosmic storyline with a massive villain in space, and then eventually at the end of a phase, you'd have both those storylines merged together with the ground-based villain and the cosmic-based villain maybe working together or causing threats at the same time. So that's the current plan, apparently, according to some reliable sources behind the scenes for the MCU. So with that being said, they can easily set up multiple villains over the next few solo Spider-Man movies so that it really pays off when they eventually do set up the Sinister Six in a future Spider-Man project. You'll recognize all the villains, you'll feel attached to a lot of these characters, and it'll be a really meaningful payoff when you essentially put all those characters together in one room with Norman Osborn. Similar to the Avengers, where you set up individual characters on their own so that you care about them and feel attached to them, and then put them together with all your other favorite characters to make a really powerful project or movie. So I think that's definitely going to happen at some point, but Marvel definitely isn't rushing it. There's definitely no point in rushing it, and I think it also makes more sense to cast a Norman Osborn before they go ahead and do a stand-in cameo to tease the fact that he's putting together the Sinister Six, or to tease the fact that he bought the original Avengers Tower. There's no need to do that just yet, and I feel like at the end of Spider-Man 3 is probably when we'll get a cameo like that, or a big setup to lead us into Tom Holland's potential college trilogy of Spider-Man movies. But that's about it. Let me know what you think of all this down below in the comments section. This has been DK Dynamite. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and turn notifications on to stay up to date with the latest and greatest Marvel news and information, and peace out, everyone.